right, so we'll now hear victim impact statements. Mr. Maybanks, I think you said we're going to have 2 today, is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
We can go ahead and hear from those at this time. If you'd have the first and step forward, is that Tyler Hoffman?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Hoffman, I'm just going to have you first just state your name, and then you can go ahead and make your statement.
My name is Tyler Hoffman. I was asked to give a victim impact statement, an opportunity for me to share how this crime has impacted me. But no, I will not be sharing how this has impacted me. I will not share the impact of hearing Megan's vehicle say Melody when she calls somebody from the vehicle's UI, because Melody is the first contact, and she has not deleted Melody as a contact. I will not share the impact of having to sign her out of my Xbox every time I turn the Xbox on because I use her controller, or the impact of the Xbox saying goodbye Melody as a result of using her controller to sign in. I will not share the impact of knowing her paintings will no longer grace the presence of any material when I see her painted bedroom door, the painted bathroom door, the painting in the living room, or the shed she painted. I will not share the impact of taking 4 months off of work at a career I've had to work hard at.
Her death looked like a tragedy of the heart. A woman, young and deeply in love, gone far too soon. To the outside world, it seemed almost poetic, a story of passion cut short, the kind of heartbreak you'd read about in novels. But behind the closed doors of the morgue, something began to unravel. Something hidden beneath the surface of flesh and bone. And when the autopsy table revealed its secret, it didn't just challenge the version of love her family believed in, it exposed a truth so unsettling, it turned every memory of her romance into a question mark. Was Melody Hoffman the victim of fate, or the victim of the one person who claimed to love her most? What really happened to Melody Hoffman? To her family, she was a daughter with a radiant smile, a woman who believed in love even when it hurt, and someone who always seemed to forgive too much. To her friends, she was the girl who lit up every room, the one who carried secrets behind her laughter, the one who always said she was fine, even when she wasn't. And to the man who claimed her heart, she was his everything, until the day she wasn't. When Melody was found lifeless, the explanation given seemed almost merciful. A sudden collapse. A fragile heart. A tragedy of life cut short. But the truth lay hidden, waiting in silence until the first incision was made. That's when doctors, investigators, and ultimately the world, would realize that Melody's death wasn't an accident. It wasn't natural. It wasn't even sudden. The autopsy whispered a story that no one was prepared to hear, a story of betrayal, of obsession, of love twisted into something dangerous. Stay with me, because once you hear what the body revealed, you'll never look at love the same way again. In the quiet stretch of the Midwest, Melody Hoffman's life unfolded with the kind of innocence that never hinted at how it would end. She was young, charismatic, and full of a light that drew people to her without effort. Melody was the type of woman who made strangers feel like old friends, and those who knew her well would often say she had a gift for forgiveness, sometimes too much of it. Her laughter carried in a way that lingered in rooms even after she had gone, and when she loved with all of herself. To her family, she was a daughter who made them proud. To her friends, she was a confidant, always listening more than she spoke. And to the man who would come to define her final chapter, she was everything. When they first met, it seemed like a story pulled straight out of the kinds of romances people envy. He was attentive, confident, the kind of presence that made Melody's eyes light up when she spoke his name. To outsiders, he was perfect. Polite with her parents, eager to please, and charming enough to make even her friends laugh. In photographs, the two looked inseparable, smiling at dinner tables, holding hands at family gatherings, frozen in moments that suggested nothing could ever touch them. And for a time, it seemed true. But if you looked closely, if you listened past the laughter, there were small cracks hidden beneath the surface. Friends would later recall moments when her smile seemed forced, when her voice trailed off mid-sentence as though her thoughts drifted elsewhere. At times, she seemed distracted, staring into space as though she was trying to find an answer she couldn't quite speak aloud. A diary entry from those months contained scattered sentences, one of them ending with the words, "I feel watched." At the time, it was brushed off as little more than the anxieties of youth. But in hindsight, those words read more like a warning. Her partner was devoted, but sometimes too devoted. He would call her constantly, asking where she was, who she was with, what time she'd be home. At first, she took it as a sign of affection, proof that she was loved. But slowly, that affection began to blur with possession. There were arguments behind closed doors, whispers of jealousy that grew sharper with time. Neighbors would later say they occasionally heard raised voices late at night, though no one ever saw Melody leave. She never told them what those arguments were about, and if she confided in her closest friends, she always softened the truth. She had a way of protecting people from her pain. Despite the tension, Melody held on to the relationship. She believed love could fix what was broken, that patience and forgiveness could smooth the rough edges of their life together. In her eyes, leaving was never an option, not yet. The people closest to her only saw the highlights, the romantic gestures, the photos, the laughter that seemed genuine. But a darker truth lingered in the background. The same love that bound her tightly to him was quietly becoming the very thing that would place her in danger. On the evening of February 17th, Melody left her mother's house. The night was ordinary, quiet. She walked out the door, stepped into the car waiting at the curb, and for her family, it was just another night. They didn't know it was the last time they would see her alive. To Melody, it was simply another chapter in her love story. But every smile in those photographs, every memory of tenderness, each one hid something no one wanted to see. At first, the cracks in Melody's perfect love story were almost invisible. They hid behind candlelit dinners and carefully curated smiles, tucked away in photo albums that told only half the truth. But behind closed doors, something else was happening, something darker. It began with whispers, small arguments about trivial things. A late text message, a night out with friends, a glance that lingered too long at someone else. At first, they passed quickly, brushed off as the ordinary turbulence of young love. But those who lived close enough could hear the escalation. Neighbors recalled nights when the walls seemed thinner than usual, when raised voices cut through the silence of suburban calm. A woman's cry, sharp, almost panicked, followed by the heavy slam of a door. Then silence, the kind of silence that leaves a ringing in your ears long after it ends. Melody's friends began to notice changes. The vibrant, carefree young woman who once spoke of endless plans for the future now carried unease in her voice. Late-night phone calls to her sister became routine. In one of those hushed conversations, she confessed she felt watched. She said she couldn't move without eyes following her every step. She laughed nervously, trying to disguise the fear, but her words carried a weight that her sister couldn't shake. And to one close friend, Melody admitted the unthinkable, "I don't know what he'll do if I leave." Those words would echo like a premonition. There were nights when Melody was seen sitting in her car long after arriving home, staring into the steering wheel as if bracing herself before stepping inside. Nights when she scrolled through her phone, typing messages she never sent. And always, there was a shadow at her side, a man once described as charming, attentive, the perfect partner, but now showing cracks that ran deep with jealousy and control. And then came the night of February 17th. A Saturday that began like any other, but ended in a mystery that still chills the community. Melody spent the evening at her mother's house. She was calm, though those who saw her remember she seemed quieter than usual, her smiles less certain. Near midnight, she said goodbye. No one imagined it would be the last time they saw her alive. She stepped into a car that night, one she had ridden in countless times before. Trusting, as she always had, that she was safe in the company of someone she loved. The taillights disappeared into the darkness, and with them, so too did Melody. When she didn't return home, concern began as a ripple, small and dismissible. Maybe she had stayed with a friend. Maybe her phone had died. But as hours passed and her silence stretched longer, that ripple grew into panic. Calls went unanswered. Messages marked "delivered" never turned blue. The absence was deafening. By morning, the illusion of control, of safety, was gone. And soon investigators would piece together fragments of her last moments, digital traces, fragments of data from her phone and watch, that hinted at something terrifying. A sudden spike in her heartbeat. Movement toward an isolated park. And then, nothing. No further signals. Just silence, as if her entire existence had been switched off in the span of a few breaths. But the true horror wouldn't emerge until her body was found. The condition in which she was discovered, and the cause of death that would follow, made no sense. It was more than a murder. It was something that spoke of rage, of obsession, of betrayal at the hands of the one she trusted most. By dawn, hope had evaporated. The night's unanswered calls, the frantic text messages, the silence that grew louder with every passing minute, all of it collapsed into one unshakable reality. A search that began with fear ended in horror. Melody's body was discovered, lifeless, in a place that should have been serene. What should have been a quiet lakefront turned into a crime scene, its waters reflecting only shadows and sorrow. At first, there was confusion. Some whispered it must have been a tragic accident. Others suggested a medical complication, a sudden collapse in the cold. These explanations, while desperate, were easier to digest than the alternative. That someone who once held her heart could have extinguished it. But the marks on her body told a different story. The bruises, the wounds, the bindings, they were not the remnants of chance or illness. They were deliberate. They were violent. They were human. The news shattered her family. Her mother's sobs broke through the sterile quiet of the morgue. Friends struggled to believe the smiling, laughing Melody they knew had been reduced to a case file, a body tagged with her name. And yet, as devastating as it was, the truth was still incomplete. Everyone gathered around her casket wanted answers. None of them were ready for the answers to come. The funeral was held under a curtain of rain. Umbrellas lined the cemetery path like blackened wings, shielding mourners who clung to one another, their grief spilling into the air. The earth was soft, heavy with water, swallowing every step with a sound that felt final. But even here, amid prayers and tears, suspicion spread like smoke. Whispers darted between lowered heads. A love story gone wrong, some said. Others shook their heads, refusing to believe the whispers at all. But the questions grew heavier with each shovelful of dirt that fell upon her grave. At night, the community lit candles in her memory. The flames flickered like fragile beacons against the darkness, casting trembling shadows that made faces look older, wearier. People wept, yes, but they also wondered. How? Why? Who could have done this? And how had no one seen the storm before it struck? For the investigators, grief was only the beginning. Suspicion demanded proof. And proof demanded science. They insisted on an autopsy, a procedure that would strip away doubt and lay bare the story written in Melody's flesh. Families prayed it would bring peace. Officers prayed it would bring clarity. No one prayed for what it actually revealed. Her loved ones left the graveyard drenched in sorrow, unaware that behind locked doors, under the harsh light of an autopsy room, another story was about to be written. A story her body had carried in silence until the scalpel traced its first line. The morgue is not a place for secrets. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the truth always rises to the surface. Melody Hoffman's body was wheeled into that cold chamber, her face pale, her form still, covered in the sterile white of a hospital sheet. For her family, this was supposed to be a step toward closure. Officials expected a medical answer, perhaps a heart attack, perhaps an undiagnosed illness. But the pathologist, trained to listen to the whispers left behind in tissue, bone, and blood, knew almost instantly something was off. Her skin told the first story. Faint discolorations along her wrists. Slight abrasions that could be overlooked as accidents, but positioned in ways that spoke of restraint. These were not injuries from a fall, not the scrapes of daily life. They were the imprints of control, pressed into her flesh like the memory of hands that held too tightly. The pathologist moved deeper. Beneath her ribcage, subtle hemorrhages, internal bruises no one on the outside had seen. They weren't catastrophic, but they were deliberate, patterned, repeated. The kind of trauma that accumulates quietly over time. Old wounds layered beneath new ones. Each scar, each faded bruise, a silent testimony of suffering. And then, the blood work. Toxicology came back with results that froze the room in silence. Traces of compounds not found in everyday medicine, not in over-the-counter remedies, not in anything Melody could have stumbled upon by accident. The substance was rare, controlled, the kind of chemical that doesn't kill instantly but works slowly, silently, gnawing at the body's systems. A substance that mimics natural decline. A substance that could make a woman look like she was simply wasting away. This was no random tragedy. It was orchestration. Her partner had told investigators she suddenly collapsed, that she'd been under stress, that grief or exhaustion may have broken her down. But the toxicology told another story, one of doses, given carefully, at intervals that matched her sudden episodes. Each decline coincided with moments she was isolated, often during visits to a secluded property he controlled. A cabin where no one else could see her suffering, no one else could witness what was happening behind closed doors. And while the science revealed what coursed through her veins, the discovery of a locked safe revealed what coursed through her heart. Inside, dozens of notes, letters never mailed, journal entries never meant for anyone's eyes but her own. In neat, looping handwriting, Melody confessed her fear, "He watches me all the time. I can't escape his shadow." On another page. "I'm leaving. I don't know when, but soon. If I stay, he will destroy me." The words carried panic. They carried resolve. But most chilling of all, they carried a timestamp just days before her death. The autopsy didn't just reveal poison in her blood. It revealed a pattern of power, of manipulation, of violence dressed up as devotion. Even her bones spoke of old fractures, healed but never explained. Injuries she had once smiled through, dismissed to friends as clumsiness. And now, with her body as evidence, those smiles took on a different meaning. They were masks, masks hiding a truth she couldn't speak out loud. Piece by piece, the narrative he had woven about a tragic, sudden loss was unraveling. Melody's body had become her witness stand. Her silence in life was replaced by evidence in death. Every scar, every toxin, every note scribbled in a locked journal stood against the man who swore he loved her. Love doesn't leave bruises that fade and return. Love doesn't dose poison in secret. Love doesn't lock away the truth in safes and shadows. Courtrooms are built for truth. For walls, a judge's gavel, 12 strangers asked to decide what really happened in the silence of someone's home. But in Melody Hoffman's case, the truth came in fragments, pages of journals, reports of bruises, whispers from neighbors, and scientific data pulled from her blood. And in the middle of it all was a man who swore he was innocent, who swore he loved her, even as her body told a different story. The trial began with photographs. Smiling snapshots of Melody and her partner, weddings, vacations, dinners with friends. To anyone on the outside, they seemed inseparable. He described himself as a devoted man, someone who worked long hours, someone who wanted nothing but her happiness. He painted their love as a fairy tale, claiming her sudden decline was as shocking to him as it was to her family. The defense leaned on this picture. A couple in love, blindsided by fate. But then came the evidence. First, the autopsy photos. Quietly, the prosecutor slid them across the jury's table. Faint bruises along her wrists. Old fractures that had healed but not been explained. The kind of images that silence a room. They weren't dramatic. They weren't bloody. They were subtle, and that was the power of them. Abuse, hidden behind everyday smiles. Next came the toxicology report. Experts walked the jury step by step through the compound found in Melody's blood, a slow, methodical poison. Not something that could be mistaken for household medicine. Not something one could stumble across accidentally. The dosage wasn't lethal in a single strike. It was administered carefully, in increments, designed to break the body down over weeks. This wasn't chance. This was patience. This was calculation. Witnesses filled in the silence. A neighbor recalled late-night arguments, Melody's voice trembling behind thin walls. A close friend described late-night phone calls, Melody whispering, "He's watching me again. I don't feel safe." Her sister told the jury about the journals, the locked safe, the letters Melody had written about escaping, about finding the courage to leave. Every word she left behind became part of the prosecution's voice, speaking for her when she no longer could. And yet, the defense clung to their story. They argued the compound could have been ingested by accident. They suggested Melody was fragile, stressed, and perhaps experimenting with medications. They painted the journals as melodrama, private writings of a woman overwhelmed, not evidence of danger. They insisted the bruises were coincidences, accidents from daily life. They claimed the prosecution was trying to twist every detail into something sinister. But then, came the letters in Melody's own handwriting. The courtroom grew still as the prosecutor read aloud, "If something happens to me, it will not be an accident." Her words were not vague. They were not exaggerated. They were a warning, etched in ink days before her body collapsed. The jury stared not at the prosecutor, not at the defense attorney, but at the man sitting just a few feet away, the man Melody had shared her life with. And still, he showed no emotion. He didn't flinch at the photos. He didn't cry when her sister sobbed on the stand. He sat there, calm, composed, his hands folded neatly in front of him. Some jurors later said it was the calmness that chilled them most. The absence of grief. The absence of anything at all. As the trial stretched on, what had once been a portrait of love unraveled into something darker, a relationship built not on devotion, but on control. The autopsy gave the prosecution science. The journals gave them Melody's voice. The testimony gave them context. Piece by piece, the puzzle was assembled, and each piece pointed in one direction. When the closing arguments came, the prosecutor's voice broke, "Love doesn't lock you in cages. Love doesn't leave poison in your blood. Love doesn't leave scars it never explains." Melody tried to leave her story behind. Now it's our duty to finish it for her. The jury was left in silence. And silence is often the loudest sound in a courtroom. The courtroom fell silent as the jury filed back in. Every eye fixed on them, searching for answers in their expressions. Hours of testimony, weeks of evidence, months of grief, all of it had led to this moment. The foreperson stood, paper trembling slightly in hand. And then, with a voice steady but heavy, the verdict was spoken. Guilty. The word cut through the room like a blade. Melody's family clutched each other, tears streaming, relief and sorrow crashing together in one overwhelming wave. Across the aisle, her partner remained still, his jaw set, his face unreadable. For the first time, the mask of charm and devotion had cracked. Behind the silence, there was no innocence left to cling to. The judge's gavel struck, sentencing him to life behind bars. A sentence not only for the act of murder, but for the months, perhaps years, of cruelty that had led to it. Yet even as the punishment was handed down, no one in the room believed justice could restore what had been lost. Melody was gone. Her laughter, her light, her chance to start over, all stolen in the name of a love that was never love at all. In the days after the trial, whispers of the case lingered across the community. People spoke of the journals, of the poison, of the bruises that had gone unnoticed for so long. They spoke of how a storybook romance had hidden a nightmare. And they wondered, how many other Melodies were still out there, living behind closed doors, smiling in photographs while suffering in silence. Her funeral became more than a farewell. It became a warning. Friends carried her casket through a rain-soaked graveyard, the sound of sobs mixing with raindrops on wood. A candlelight vigil lit the night sky, each flame a symbol that her story would not be buried with her body. Melody had written her fears in secret notes, but through the trial, through the verdict, her voice had finally been heard. But perhaps the most chilling part of Melody's story was this: it was never supposed to be a crime of passion, never an act of sudden rage. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was a love story rewritten into a weapon. And the autopsy, the one final examination of her body, was the only reason the truth came to light. So, what is love, if it can be twisted into this? What is trust, if it can be poisoned so carefully? And what would you have done, if someone you knew, someone you loved, was hiding bruises beneath their smile? Melody Hoffman's story ended in tragedy. But it is a reminder to all of us, sometimes the most dangerous place for a person is not a dark alley, but the very home they think they're safe in. The verdict brought justice. But justice came too late. The verdict had been spoken. Guilty. The man Melody once trusted, once loved, now condemned to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Yet as the gavel struck and the sentence was handed down, a strange silence lingered in the courtroom. Because justice, while served, felt impossibly late. Nothing could bring Melody back. Nothing could erase the suffering etched into her final days. Her voice was silenced, but her body spoke the truth. The autopsy revealed not just how she died, but how she lived in fear, trapped, controlled, hidden behind the mask of a love story gone wrong. Every scar, every bruise, every word scribbled in her journals carried the weight of a story she couldn't say out loud. It was her final testimony. In the end, it wasn't love that killed Melody Hoffman. It wasn't fate, or chance, or illness. It was obsession, disguised as devotion. A twisted kind of control that masqueraded as care. And when the truth came out, it showed that sometimes the person who swears they'd give you the world, is the same one who takes it all away. Love leaves scars. Some fade with time. But some cut too deep to ever heal. So now, I'll ask you, do you believe Melody's story was a tragedy of passion, an explosion of emotions gone too far, or was it always a murder waiting to happen? Was her fate sealed the moment she fell in love, or was there ever a chance to save her? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think, because stories like Melody's are not just stories. They're warnings. They're reminders of what can happen when love is twisted into possession. And this won't be the last case. In the next story, we'll uncover another haunting truth, another autopsy that revealed secrets no one was prepared to hear. If Melody's story disturbed you, what comes next may chill you even more.